what makes a problem? And so today, I'd really like for our call to be open, kind of an open discussion of just a group of friends having a conversation. And with the topic of what makes a problem, I am fascinated with the resilience we possess that we don't know we possess, that we don't know is innate within us. So the topic of what makes a problem, I'd like to open it to just hear from you guys, from your mind, what makes a problem? Just upon reflection, what's it look like to you?
Something that's going to bother me.
Something that's going to bother you. Okay, excellent. Who else?
Something that might.
Go ahead, Martin. You go first.
Something that might be an unsurmountable or insurmountable inconvenience.
So, and Dorena, what was yours? I want to make this. I'll write this down.
Okay. And by the way, my husband Jim is joining us, and I just want to say I only have the 40-minute free webinar, so if I go out, that's the reason this time.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay. Jim,
Right.
Nice to meet you. Nice to see you.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Cherie, I blurted out something that's a problem that has to be solved,
Okay. Something that has to be solved. Is that correct, Elrena?
That'd be good.
Okay.
That'd be good.
Something that could threaten our lives and require us to make uncomfortable changes.
Okay.
Something that I'm like ruminating on and maybe making it bigger than it actually is.
Excellent. Thank you, Susan.
What do you think about a situation?
It's something that I don't understand. When I don't understand something, or maybe, misinform, information or misunderstandings.
Oh, okay. Or like that, or lack of information, lack of understanding. Does that make sense, Kim? What you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. Lack of information or misunderstanding.
Misunderstanding. Okay.
Misinformation.
Okay, Bobby, and tell me what you said?
What you're thinking about a situation.
Cool. Excellent. So, everything everybody mentioned, whether it is has something to do with inconvenience, perceived threat, something that has to be solved, something you find yourself ruminating on, something that you don't have enough information on or lack understanding on, and what you're making about it, what we make about it. So I think that also, I think what makes a problem oftentimes is expectations in a way of like, well, this, whether it's conscious or not conscious, it's not part of the plan. It's we have preferences, and our preferences oftentimes can be the root of what we make a problem. Anything that kind of breaks norms, whether it's our norm, societal norms, norms of the decorum you're familiar with. But what I want you to see is what I think is so helpful, because I am such a fan of understanding and utilizing the resilience we carry and we are born with, is that situations in life what I want you to see is that situations occur in life, they exist for everyone. But what I find so fascinating, the place to get curious about is for those of us on this call, I could bring a topic up and more of us than not will have a different opinion on that topic. Okay. So back to that point about, okay, what causes a problem or what makes a problem oftentimes is going to be how I'm holding it. Now, what do I mean by how I'm holding it? I love the example of a pink slip. Like you're in the corporate environment, you hear, the subtle tones, movement through it, the current of the office that pink slips are coming out on Friday. Now, what I want to point to is that the fact that pink slips exist, and pink slips, I'm defining a pink slip as notification that there's a redundancy, you're going to be laid off, you will not have the same job you have at this moment, is how I'm defining pink slips. And so as the current carries throughout the office, it's interesting how some people view the potential on Friday as being the worst thing ever. Another person sees it as an opportunity. Another person sees it as like, great, what's going to be my package? Because I'm wanting to take a break anyway. So that part about events in life that occur in our lives are fluid. They rarely hang around forever, and oftentimes we don't see them the same. So to that point about what makes a problem, it gives us the opportunity to be introspective and take some responsibility or take an opportunity to see or even question, well, how am I holding this? Because if everyone universally does not experience the situation the same, then we're operating off of how I hold whatever is occurring. Now, the difference in that is like gravity. Everybody experiences gravity the same way. Nobody, I guess other than being in a spaceship, and you're in an anti-gravity compartment or you're on the moon, you experience gravity different. But for the rest of us land dwellers, earth dwellers, we experience gravity the same. So that would be a place to see, well, that's a universal experience for all people. We all experience gravity this way. But, why am I not? I can be curious about how I'm holding that pink slip. Now, I want to just check in to see if that makes sense or if that rings true for you, that everyone holds a particular topic in their own way.
Totally.
I think that's true.
I think it's particularly true right now.
Yes.
In a way that it makes it easy to see, actually.
That is so true, Trudy. We have many opportunities these days to check in and
see that. Mm-hmm.
and see how reasonable people could be so different see something so different than how you see it. I think it's a prime opportunity to see how these topics are not universal and how they are so much individually based on the state of mind of the individual. And Delrina, yes.
All right. Maybe it's the way we label it.
And tell me more about what you mean.
Well, we would all, I'm thinking you're leading, we all agree there is a problem. So then it becomes how we label it that then triggers probably our reaction to it. I don't know if that is a sequence or not, but labels are, when a problem has a label, then I think it goes from there.
Right. And I think even before that, one step before that would be how something goes from completely neutral
Uh-huh.
to a problem. That would be kind of the piece of the pie we're pointing to now, is how it gets distinguished from a rainstorm being just a rainstorm, and now the rainstorm's a problem for me. So it's that narrow piece of pie before it gets labeled and identified as a problem. Yeah, Martin.
I was going to say, I guess it also stems from past experience and conditioning of how we relate to a, quote, situation.
Totally. And I love that you bring that up, Martin, because it's like how often we come to any life experience without a clean slate. How much conditioning, how much histrionics we bring, how much, just to kind of quote that, how much of I'll say it's like the antithesis of beginner's mind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to people we have history with in our life. It's like we rarely come to the conversation with a clean slate of curiosity. We pretty much have a lot of who we think they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's also how we can take things on, is find that beginner's mind again with everything. I mean, that's part of the quite delightful game part of it, actually, in my opinion. Every time I go to take a picture of my flowers I just got through taking them, I'm thinking about that. How do I come back to that place? So it becomes a practice, for me.
I think, yeah, Trudy, I think that's a very curious place to be. It's like, gosh, as human beings, it's like I kind of think when you said that, like playing the game of, can I really be safe and not bring everything I've accumulated to be true about life into this moment?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I think in creative pursuits, like you're talking about, Trudy, like whatever it is you pursue, I don't care what it is, but the creative process is always asking you to open your mind, open your eyes, open your ears, whatever it is that you do, and make space for something brand new.
Mm-hmm.
And in the moment of like looking for flowers, I'm saying flowers because Trudy is a photographer. She loves to photograph flowers.
She's obsessed. She's obsessed. Just call it what it is.
Oh no! I think it's a wonderful obsession.
It is a wonderful obsession. And it's springtime here. It's so cool.
But Trudy, to your point, if you went out every time you had a desire to go photograph flowers and you weren't open, I wonder where the juice would be for you in shooting flowers.
I have to say the juice is in the moment, and I think this applies to what we're saying. It's in the moment. It's like, honestly, the moment I get in front of with my camera, I just did this a minute ago with crocuses outside that I was afraid the light was going to change. So I grabbed it, and I come to it having to return to that neutral place. Because if I don't, I do bring all the baggage with me in that moment. And next thing I know, I'm photographing it the same way I've always photographed it. It is boring. And then I start the labeling, like she was just talking about. So it's all about staying with that and trying to find what's new to this moment. And I think it metaphors exactly, which is part of the reason I'm drawn to do it right now, because it's much easier to do it this way. than what we're faced with right now. So it's really it really teaches me over and over how to keep returning to neutral. 'Cause I'm just going to have a bunch of pictures I can delete, so it doesn't matter, you know.
Mhm.
But it's all about that process of where I can find that way in, where I really have entered something new and fresh with, and I see it. It has its aliveness and vibrancy mirroring back at me when I do it.
Mhm.
And it might take sometimes 50 shots.
Well, I
Yeah.
think the part that you pointed to is that doing everything the same old way, it's going to go flat. Your creative process is going to be flat.
Go flat, right? Right.
And so in that same way, if that's why I love the analogy, metaphor, whatever you want to call it, about the creative process, is that the creative process is such a lab rat for life, and how they're parallel dynamics. So in the creative process, it's like it's the giving up the old, being open to the new, or maybe not giving up the old, but just being open to the new, being open to fresh inspiration in the moment, is what really ignites and keeps us in the game of creating, because we get so beyond what our mind has made up as what's possible in the creative process just by engaging. And then that's where, to me, that's where the aliveness of life is, in the moment, not in the history, or not in the what ifs of tomorrow, but in the moment is where the aliveness is, and also where the inspiration is, and also where wisdom resides. Wisdom that can be so relevant and pertinent to that moment. Now,
Yep.
It's, kind of like people go, well, you need to know that if you put your hand on a hot stove, it's going to burn. It's like, yep, you'll do that once and you'll remember. But then what happens too often is that we use that level of, I'll say, kind of black and whiteness to everything, So you can translate it in your own world, how many ways something has happened, and the memory of what happened once before gets between you and the present moment of possibility.
Totally. Well said. Boy.
What I was going to say is that what's been coming up for me since Trudy spoke is this notion of finding a new way in. It seems like that this calls for like a stopgap of when we are presented with an issue that we then label as a problem. How can we stop and say, okay, how can I find a new way into this, which gives me a whole nother way of experiencing the situation that has just presented itself.
Exactly. I've been like playing that game of like, because when all that history or all the fear about the what ifs or consequences, like we talked about, when all of that kind of shows up on the scene, all of a sudden, oh my gosh, all of a sudden it feels like you're stuck, or you have no clarity whatsoever. You have no clue what to do next. You're like, oh, you're in that place of incredible contraction where you kind of feel like you're in slow motion or you froze. And so I think in those times and in those moments, what happens is that we've brought everything from the past. We brought every fear of potential consequence from the future on the scene of this particular situation. And I love the idea of like when that happens, what occurred to me one time, and I just kind of play with it, was like, well, if this weren't a problem, what would I do? And it never fails. It tends to open the lockdown. You know, if this weren't a problem, what would be the next easiest thing I do? And something always comes to mind. An easy, simple next step. Something always comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it gives us the opportunity to take some of that wear and tear off your system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like your term, open the lockdown. I think that's what Trudy and I have been talking a lot about, the situation we find ourselves in right now. I'm immune compromised, so we're concerned about what's happening right now.
Sure.
And so we could look at this situation as being locked down here, or we can look for ways, how can we utilize this time and do other things, even out of the house and in nature, away from people. So, I mean, looking for ways to open the lockdown, I think is good.
That's
in
a great expression.
any problem that we feel locked in to.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that. Thank you.
And I think it's a great place of inquiry just to play with, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because what's happened so often is once I get that feeling that this is a problem, I drank the Kool-Aid that it's a problem. My whole body is flooded with a feeling to match how I'm holding it.
Mm-hmm.
So back to the point, like the pink slip, if I'm holding it like a yeehaw, I'm looking at a 6-month vacation. I'm flooded with that feeling,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So in that place of God, of knowing that, or kind of noticing that my experience of anything is up for grabs. I didn't know that. I thought it was dictated by the situation. And then I started to gain understanding that no, my experience of the circumstance is what's creating my experience. Not the pink slip. Pink slip is just a piece of paper that's pink. What I'm making about that pink slip is giving me the felt sense of my state of mind. If I'm thrilled about it, I'm flooded with the feeling of being thrilled. If I am worried, sick, convinced that this is the catalyst of my demise, I'll be flooded with that.
And it pretty much will be.
You what?
It pretty much will be.
Totally.
You're stacking the deck against yourself if you give in. Yeah.
Totally. And what we see too is like once we oh, Martin, I love your term. Once we kind of go into mental lockdown, there is no space. There is no space. There is no opportunity to hear or experience new, because we're on lockdown. We've locked it. We've sealed it. We've put another lock on it. You know, we've made it airtight. We've trapped it inside us. And it's like, wow, if I know that there are other possibilities than what my mind is generating at any moment, if I know that, and I know that because if I look around, other people have generated different ideas about the same topic. That to me shows that how I'm experiencing this before or after if it's not a problem, B, after I've already labeled it as a problem, that there's more facets to this than I'm seeing, and the proof is right in front of me. So it's like, wait a minute, I can start to, again, open my mind to Okay, it's pretty dead set on that. But what else is out there? What else is out there?
Where is it?
He's got it. You'll see where you.
Does
We got
anybody
we got a
else have-
hand up.
We got a hand up.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
It's
I
that
just-
Chinese woman.
Oh, Delrina, I didn't see it. There's the number on the call. I can't see
That's all
everybody.
right. I've been kind of, maybe I don't know how. It sounds like that you, in order to address what we define as a problem, that being in a creative activity helps us focus and enjoy that, which relaxes certainly hormones or something in our brains, I guess. And I wonder if other things like physical activity and meditation help open the mind, so that, like we've been talking about, Martin, and all, opening space or just taking the activity of the anxiety away.
Totally.
So what do you think about some ways to know you've labeled a problem? How do you kind of work towards figuring out what level it is for you, and maybe what it triggers in terms of certain fears or something? Would you speak to that?
Sure, because I think if you, each one of us has a source of wisdom that moves our life. You know, it's the wisdom that heals our physical body. It's the wisdom that rises the sun, sets the sun. We each have our own access to this wisdom, and I believe that anytime we want or even have a desire to be freer minded, we can just listen to what makes sense to us next. And each person might do a very different thing. Because you have your own answers. And I think that if it makes sense to sit and meditate, by all means. In that moment going, I just need to clear my head. I'm tired of ruminating on this. I'm tired of obsessing on this. It's like, what could I do? What could I do? And it's not that you have to do something to clear your mind, but if you ask yourself that question, it helps you get in the present moment and engage with something. That might be decluttering for you. That might be working in the garden. It might be swinging a golf clubs. Who knows? Who knows? But this wisdom you possess will give you something that is a perfect fit for you.
Mm-hmm.
And if
Can
it's
I share something?
yes, Kim, please.
Well, since we're on the subject, the news is changing every day over here, and my life as well, because, we're just north of Italy, and that's not so cool right now.
Mm-hmm.
But so today, the way I dealt with all this sort of anxiety and just time, things changing so quickly, well, I started collaging, I started painting paper, cutting paper, layering, and just I told you earlier, Cherie, that my son is doing home office, so my art room is sort of taken over. So I don't even have my own art room. And so I took plastic, I put it down on the kitchen table, put some newspaper, got my paint, scissors, glue, and just had a little art party for one. And that really helped my mind to sort of calm down and just be in the present. And I think that helped me get through the day when I was feeling kind of stressed and anxiety-like.
And so, Delrina, to what Kim is pointing at, it's like whatever occurs to you. There's no one size fits all. But if I want to have a clearer mind in this moment, it might just be, you might binge Netflix. Who knows? It doesn't matter. It's whatever works for you. Whatever works for you. Knowing that your mind will clear whatever you get in the present moment and engage with what you're doing, your mind's going to clear.
Yeah.
Because you can't, it's kind of like it feels like you can have your mind in a bunch of different places, but I love the metaphor of like a brain surgeon. If a brain surgeon's got my head open, I want that person's mind in one place at the end of that scalpel in my brain. So the more present, the more efficient we are, the more we're in the present moment, so we can't really dwell on consequences, perceived consequences, because it's all fiction until it unfolds. Sadly, I don't know if that's sadly or not, but it's all made up until it unfolds. So I think that point of, seeing where ruminating on the what ifs is going to be exhausting to the body, exhausting to your experience of life. So does that answer your question, Dorena? Because it's really about what seems like an easy next step for you, and something will come.
Well, thanks. I do. I think it's maybe the word distraction, in order to choose to take ourselves out of what we feel is tense or what our brain is telling us we need to think about. And so getting out of those zones is just through doing something that only you can, I appreciate what you say, what your brain invites you to, so that your inner wisdom will have an opportunity and a place to kind of bring some ideas or insights. So yes, you really helped with that. Thank you very much.
And I think to that point of like, if we really saw the cost of ruminating in this land of fiction, if we really saw the cost, we would steer ourselves out of it as soon as our wisdom wakes us up to like, oh, not going there, not going there. and I equate that to like, if you're prepping for a colonoscopy, the cost of cheating on that fast. And you're like,
you come up with the best metaphors.
So, but ruminating is the same way. Like, If we really equated that to the impact ruminating has on my sense of well-being, it'd be just like that colonoscopy. You're not going to cheat, no matter how good it looks or how hungry you are. You're not going to cheat. You'll just say, I'll do my best and stay out of it.
Good.
I know. I know. I say that because I was like having to stare down with a popsicle the last time I had a colonoscopy, and I'm like going, as hungry as I am and as good as that popsicle looks, I don't think it's part of the plan. It had pineapple chunks in it, and I was like, My mind was really trying to get me to eat it, saying, "Oh, it's not good. Oh, come on." It's, I was like, not doing that. Yeah, because where your mind is, your life will follow.
Yeah.
Always.
That's it right there. You need to post that on Facebook.
That's a good one. That's refrigerator door worthy.
Yeah. Okay, say it again. I want to hear it one more time. I'm writing it down.
Oh, I said where your mind goes, your life will follow. So the other part that I wanted to really come back to is that whatever shows up in your life, whether it gets tagged as a problem or it doesn't get tagged as a problem, whatever the situation is that presents itself in your life, I'm curious if you feel like, or you really are grounded in the truth that while you may not have the answer now, the answer will come. And I'm curious if in that realm of, I don't know if you want to call it spiritual confidence, intellectual confidence, whatever kind of confidence you need, do you feel like you are plugged into a source that will bring you solutions?
Yeah, that's the most important thing to remember. And it's not isolated to just us. It's true for everybody.
Every human being, every human being. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's been my experience in many, many ways. That if I just relax, become quiet, and be receptive, generally I will get the solution, the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or as one person put it, a friend of mine's friend, it may not come when you want it, but it always comes on time.
Right. It comes at
I
the
adore
perfect
that.
time.
Yeah.
It comes at the perfect time. Maybe, like I said, it's not FedEx 10 a.m. tomorrow, but it's
Right.
and that's the part that I think is important. It's like, I know for me, I didn't think I had, I thought it was going to be completely dependent on my individual intellect. And I was quite convinced for a long time that my intellect was not developed enough to be able to navigate what life might offer.
Mm-hmm.
And that couldn't be farther from the truth, because while I see that we are all tapped into a much larger source of wisdom, and my intellect can be a servant to that wisdom.
Sometimes, though, it takes us being tested. It takes us really going through something and putting all of that into our integrated cellular experience.
Totally.
And once we do that, we can't ever tell ourselves otherwise. No matter how hard we try, or no matter how much more challenges we're faced with, we can't tell ourselves otherwise because we've experienced it. So sometimes when we do have to confront something difficult, it's a gift, because it allows us to see what we're really made out of, and what being connected to source really, how it really can manifest in our lives. It becomes past theory and concept.
Totally. Especially after you navigate.
Embrace it. Yeah.
What was that?
So we can embrace what we have in front of us, knowing that.
Totally. Even if we don't, if we're so blown over, or I'll say so destabilized by what seems to be happening in the moment, somehow we navigate through that moment, because we're all still here. Here we sit. Mm-hmm. I know all of us have faced something we never thought we'd find ourselves in, more times than not, and then we look back and go, if you'd asked me if I could handle that, I would have, you would have said, mm-mm. And then, but here we sit.
Right.
Here we sit. Delrina.
Well, I kind of want to expand on where your mind is, your life will follow.
Mm-hmm.
What, Cherie, about the wholeness of who we are, the mind, body, and spirit? So our mind maybe makes the choices, but how would we finish the sentence where our heart is will follow? Because that would be, I think, tapping into compassion. That would be, our heart experiences something, or we see something. Certainly our mind registers what we see, but it's our heart that gives us the message of the ouch.
Well, and the fact of all human beings is all human beings cognitively become aware via the tool of thought. I mean, you may have like an anxious stomach, something, or a sensation in your heart, but it's going to travel through the cognitive processes of the body to go because excitement could be fear in one person's mind, and excitement could be exhilaration in another person's mind. So that we sense things in our body, but it's when it travels up to here, it's kind of the vehicle of thought wakes us up to something, you know. So it's just kind of a mechanics piece of like, for me to become aware of something, it's going to come to me in a thought. Like that's a door, that's a flower, you know, that's the sidewalk. Does that answer your question, Delreen, or?
Yeah, I think it does. In other words, those are channels. The heart or a heartfelt experience, and the body's physical reaction. Then yes, they do ultimately channel up through the mind for, is this a problem?
Well, and to your point, it's like, you know, when I'm sure everybody's had these moments where you just felt so full, you know, where it seems like your mind is quiet and you just have a felt sense of being so full. You know, some people may call it love, some people may call it peace, some people may call it compassion, but you know, have y'all sensed that? And it's kind of a sense, like you can't even really put labels on it, but there's just such a richness in the moment that just fills you up. Yeah, you're aware of it, but you can't even put labels on it. But the mind is even as I'm trying to speak right now, trying to find a word to match with that felt sense. But there are times where you have a felt sense of something much grander and bigger than you can even put a label on.
Well, maybe working on what I selfishly, perhaps, I apologize, but where our heart is, maybe I would try to finish that with, is where my inspiration will follow, or something like that.
Absolutely, and even Ellen's mentioned that, where your heart is, your mind, your mind will follow, your life will follow. It's like all of it is going to be how open is your mind to hold it. You know, because you can't be I can't say that, but I think in that place of even where your heart goes, your life follows. It's like your steady mind cannot be in a hateful place, and be heartfelt at the same time. You know what I mean? In that same way, you may really care about somebody and be mad at them, but you could still, your state of mind could still be open and be oriented to love, while you have that temporary, you know, experience of anger or frustration or whatever. So you're kind of grounded in goodwill toward life, which would be compassion, which would be coming from the heart, which would be allowing surface upsets to be just that, surface upsets, not giving you feedback about life. What else?
You know, I just feel like there's two people we haven't heard anything from, but I'd like to add something that I think goes off on this direction. Is of an experience I had yesterday, that I find myself in these times getting clear, and that's where I feel my strength and my protection and my empowerment, and really realize that these can be very powerful and you know, full of generosity times. But I ran into this thing where somebody really wanted to debate with me the seriousness of the situation, who obviously has a very different pair of eyes and educates himself differently than I do about it all. And I realized when I got off the phone, I was drained and exhausted.
Mm.
And so it brings, and I said to Martin, that's it. I'm not having any more of those conversations with anyone. And it goes right to where you're talking right now, Cherie, is that we come back to the premise that we all always see things differently. And it comes from our enculturation, our conditioning, on and on and on, just to really go there. And I realized, not to fault this person, but that's where they were coming from. And that's their way of seeing things was also their coping mechanism. But what I take from that is that one of my tools is to really watch what I feed. And so I was feeding that. I was feeding, maybe I have to make somebody see it the way I see it, or be able to listen to what even he wants to see. I was feeding that even by giving him my time and listening. However, I chose to communicate with him. But the looking at creativity, looking at when we come back to our heart with compassion, looking at how we deal with our mind, how we might add certain activities that help us deal with that, help us stay centered, all these different things. If we focus on feeding that, it's kind of like, I don't really have time for that other. It just it eliminates itself. I don't think it would be drawn to me either. So, or I'd be drawn to it. So I just, I don't know, that always works for me, is to stop. What am I feeding?
I think that's
feeding being right. Yeah.
I think it's a great point, Trudy, because it's like, wait a minute. In this world of that we live in, when we wake up to I'll say the rarity that somebody sees it just like I do.
Right.
Versus thinking I can only be in relationship or have conversations with people that see it the way I do. Because I'm like, oh my God, it makes me wonder how anybody even gets together and stays together, because nobody sees it exactly the same way. But I know the part that to me feels juicy about being human is understanding that we're all just seeing it with our eyes, and that I can care about the individual, but I don't even have to care about how they see it. I mean, they're entitled to how they see it, and I don't need to spend my energy on that, but I can just realize that as another human being, we're really just seeing it the way we see it. And they have that right, and I do too. And there, by no means do I need to convince them, because in that convincing place is exhausting.
It's exhausting and draining. And the other thing is, why not have compassion for that too? Because when you really look at where we are, we're seeing very clearly right now that our actions affect others more specifically than we ever have, to really come into that compassionate side of ourselves. In my case, if I get sick, my husband gets sick, and his is life-threatening. So my actions directly affect him and every decision I make about it. So it's never been this tangible to realize how our actions affect others. It's a time for immense growth of compassion, to live from compassion. And I'm really tuned into that. So I want to have compassion for the fact that he saw that so differently, and not give it my time.
Right. And not give it your time, because you have a choice there.
Right.
And in that place of like, wait a minute, in your heart, you're doing everything that comes to mind to you to, I'll say, to protect the well-being of your household. So for a household with with a compromised immune system, so it's like, to that point, Trudy, if your mind is too congested on trying to convince somebody to see things your way, you're going to miss fresh ideas that would occur to you to ground yourself in what your heart's intention is, which is to make the safest space possible in your home, you know. So
Right.
I think we can make a choice going, no, that's not worth my bandwidth.
That's right.
Love them,
That's
but it's not worth my bandwidth.
right.
I'm
And
not
also,
here to change
it felt toxic, and it felt like I just poured toxicity over me. You know, I had to really work with myself for a while afterwards. Like, whoa.
Right.
And I don't think I normally would have noticed that. And that's good to notice that. This is how we learn how to create boundaries, healthy boundaries in our life.
Right. And you're under no obligation to discuss any topic you don't want to discuss.
Right. Right.
You know, like I said, like it's food is a prime example. You know, there's some foods I won't eat and other foods people wouldn't dare eat. So, you know, so it goes back to like those preferences going, don't let preferences be a determinant of making something a problem. Mm-hmm. You have every right for your preferences. They have every right for their preferences. And it doesn't mean anything about your connection if the preferences don't match.
Yeah.
So, Susan, do you have anything you'd like to share?
I'm not really sure that I do at the moment. It's been really good just to listen to everybody else's perspective. Sorry if that seems like a cop out.
No, not at all. I just didn't want you to not check in with you.
I mean, I think one thing that you touched on earlier, Cherie, was sort of around expectations, and that's probably a huge one for me. It's kind of, you know, entering into situations with, you know, an expectation of how things should be or how you expect them to be. And obviously that's kind of a bit of a recipe for disaster, because you're just really setting yourself up for a fall in many respects. And I think certainly I see in my life that that's kind of quite prevalent when it comes to sort of causing problems, if you like, because I'm kind of going in with this preconceived idea of how I think it should be, and maybe not necessarily being open to just what it is, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And what I think you're speaking to too, Susan, is like sometimes it's not until we're living life or engaging with life do we wake up to, whoa, I really didn't even realize I was holding an expectation on how this should play out, how they should be, how ... but by engaging in life, do we get the opportunity to wake up to, I saw that completely differently, and how can I see it as an expectation versus a problem I need to solve, or it means something about me.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
I know.
Do you want to say more about that, Cherie? I think that's a really important point.
Especially the part of it means something about me.
Or that is, I think it's a problem I need to solve. That was, you got my attention when you said that.
Mm-hmm.
And that it means something about me. That's powerful.
Well, I would say, I just would say kind of watch it, because in this conversation of just even addressing the fact that we carry these invisible expectations, and I think it shows up so often in relationship that we get disappointed by someone doing something. And I think one of the hardest things was for me to see in those really emotionally gripping times is like, wait a minute, where I thought it was about me, it was like when you really have the opportunity to kind of, to use your camera analogy, you know, come back. It's like, oh, wait a minute. I really had an expectation of how this was going to be. And secondly, it's not about me. That's just how they operate in life.
Mm-hmm.
I just happened to be the one in the crosshairs at that moment, but that's how they operate in life. I didn't see that. I didn't see that at all. Even if they're, mad at me for something, it's like, oh, that's how they operate in life when they get upset. I didn't cause this pain. That's how they operate. Yes, Delrina.
Well, you're bringing me to that phrase we use. Well, that's their problem, and that feels a little bit negative because problem carries a sort of a downer tone to it. So I wonder about what just crossed my ticker tape is in the future when I understand where my boundaries are and another person's, if that's what you're talking about, then, or what I have a right to through discernment of myself, then maybe that's the way they are or something like that, so that I don't hear myself diss someone, which is such a usual way of speaking. Oh, that's their problem.
Right, right.
I can change my phrasing, because if I speak that way to someone else, I also want to speak to myself in a kind way, like that's the way I'm looking at it, instead of that's my problem. And,
right. Or even thinking that in those opportunities, instead of us going to, well, that's their problem. Yes, it is their problem. But wait a minute. If I was really curious, how could I understand more about what's going on with this person?
Well, that's where the heart comes in, I think, with the compassion.
Yeah, yeah.
I had an experience with that recently,
Mm-hmm.
and I watched somebody get really upset, and I was able to look at that and go, that's how they are in this situation. This is how they respond in this situation. And I noticed how I really want to take credit for somebody else's behavior. And it's really interesting to realize that that's just made up. And yeah, and I was able to look at this person and just kind of like notice and like your word curious, with curiosity as opposed to judgment, just like, wow, and it was really nice. And it didn't pour any fuel on the fire or anything. It just, I just was there, and it was really interesting, and it worked out, and that person came to realize that they were well, what they did was tell me they appreciated my whatever, I don't remember the words, but anyway, but appreciated the fact that I didn't get all caught up in it. So it was nice, and I didn't feel personal at all. It was really nice to do that and feel real warm toward that person the entire time.
Wow.
Yeah.
What you're describing sounds very fresh, Bobby, versus our old operating system. If somebody's got to be wrong, somebody's got to be right. They need to see where they're wrong. They need me to show them where they're wrong.
Yeah. Yes.
Correct. Breach of connection. That's the opposite of connection. We all yearn for richer connection,
Yeah. I can solve that problem for you.
Yeah. If you just listen.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I want to circle back just because I feel like this point is so important that regardless of what situations come into your life, invited or not invited, I just want to really reiterate that playing with the notion that this is not a problem will free your mind to be open to what could be an easy next step, an easy, neutral next step, and that you have that capacity within you. And to Trudy's point, it's like it's not going to be Amazon, FedEx, or it might be instant, or it might be in a week. Who knows? But you have it. You possess that ability, and it will bring insights to you that incremental, might give you a tiny drop, do that, or it might bring you the whole enchilada, who knows? But you have that capacity, and that's the part that I really want you to orient to, that I may not know now, but I do know I am anchored in a wisdom that will give me something.